Hey guys, welcome back to Danger Planet. This is Doug. I'm here with a bunch of friends, and today we're talking all about Sandeep and his keyword. I'm here with Haku, a very, very special guest, Rage Quit Wire Pete, and also a not so special guest, but still one that we love, Mr. Joel. Say hello, everybody, to the internet.
Pew! What's up?
Hello. Hello, Internet.
I'm glad you guys all seem very excited.
And as per usual, before we kick off the tier list itself, we're going to hear from Jeff from Defectve Dice about who Sandeep is. Jeff?
Sandeep Desai grew up as an orphan in guild-occupied India. He was raised at a local temple and became a good student, quickly learning the ways to manipulate the elements. But he also witnessed the mistreatment of his people by the guild, instilling a hatred for the organization in him. And when the soldiers finally came and executed his master for speaking out against the government, Sandeep sought revenge. He picked up the gada that his master used to wield, which was possessed by an angry spirit, Banasuva, and he unleashed it on the foreigners. This made him a criminal in his homeland, so he ran away to Malifaux with the help of Victor Ramos and the Arcanists. In exchange, Ramos asked him to mentor the next generation of Arcanists to help them learn to wield magic. Being a teacher suited Sandeep, and even though he had to hold his classes in secret, under the watchful eye of the guild, he enjoyed living his life in peace. When Ramos was arrested, and the Arcanists were thrown into chaos, almost leading to civil war, Sandeep chose not to take sides. He preferred to stay on the sidelines, calmly observing and offering neutral advice to anyone who would listen. He's always tempted to embrace the power that Banasuva offers him, but with very few exceptions, he's usually able to keep calm and resist the temptation.
Wild stuff. All right, Doug, back over to you.
All right, so as is tradition, I guess let's kick it off with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sandeep 1. Haku, do you want to just give a very high-level overview of Sandeep, and then whatever you don't feel like covering, kick it over to Pete? Let's just get a high overview on this guy.
Yeah, sure. Sandeep 1 specifically is much more of a summoning guru, I guess, pretty much. The main thing he ends up doing is having a lot of abilities to take the concentrate action to do fun different things, and you can do that with all of your elementals and stack that around in a giant circle and summon them and turn small gamers into big golems. He has a decent amount of other draw effects, some point controls things. Overall, though, I've never been terribly impressed with Sandeep. He has a stat 5 melee. While his gun ignores friendly elementals for friendly fire, they don't ignore that's it. It's not even just ignore friendly fire, it's only friendly elementals for friendly fire. And so a lot of his actions actually feel like a decent letdown, except for his bonus action, which is great, except for explodes a guy. There's been cute ways in the past to abuse this. A lot of it was like poison Gamin, and a lot of irresistible ping damage was potential out there. Most of those lists never ended up working that great, or I never saw anyone run it to at least a high level. That being said, he's always been a consistent master. He's suffered his fair share of, I don't want to say nerfs really, but kind of.
We can call it nerfs. It's okay.
Yeah. He suffers his fair share of nerfs, as well as just being outpaced a little bit by the power creep we've been seeing in other masters. And yeah, I think that's pretty much Sandeep 1 for me in a nutshell. I haven't played terribly too much, which is why we have the guests here to really hammer in what he does in this GG. Because I'll admit this, my great experience with Sandeep is in M3E.
Yeah, and Sandeep 1, I think the reason why people probably think he got nerfs into the ground is because summoners just in general, I think were most part pretty down in GG3, and he was one of them. But I think now that we're in GG4 and there's a little less focused on killing, I think the whole, let's put our powers combined, get a golem and all this, range stuff, blowing up poison Gamin. Because, I bought these poison Gamin and I never played him with Sandeep 2, but it's totally a Sandeep 1 thing. So I'm pretty excited to see this GG and what people are going to do with Sandeep 1. But yeah, he's a summoner. build stuff, summon them into a big golem, throw different gammon into people, blow them up. It's good times.
Yeah, I think you guys are pretty accurate here in terms of didn't directly have nerfs applied to him, but maybe hasn't been at the top of his game for a bit now. I mean, what do
Except
you
for
think, Joel?
Kandara.
Yeah, that's fair. What do you think, Mr. Joel? What's your take here?
I played a lot of Sandeep in GG0 and GG1. He was my primary master when 3rd edition first dropped, and he's definitely fallen behind as the rules have changed and as the meta has changed. I think there's still a lot of fun to be had with this master, and I think you can win games with him if you're willing to put in the reps and learn things. One thing he has that neither Peter or Longton mentioned was he has the ability to hand out activations to other elementals with Command the Elements. And this is actually a pretty strong ability because just handing out AP like that in general is pretty good at range. And it also comes with a free movement. You get a 2-inch push before you do anything. So this is a very good way to get models you want to interact out of engagement without having to disengage. It's a good way to just push things around if you start getting bogged down by alphas or masters or models that have auras you don't really want to deal with. That's what I found Sandeep to be really good at, is people kind of think you can kind of crash into them and keep your crew bottled up, but you have enough out of activation movement that that's very difficult to accomplish. And that is more true with Sandeep 1, but there is some play there with Sandeep 2, as we'll talk about.
Yeah, that's a good point, I think. I mean, given that, guys, we didn't give him a proper tier ranking. What do you think, like, B-, C+ is, like, kind of like the top of sometimes higher for Sandeep 1? Do you guys think that's fair?
I'm always going to take the title, not gonna lie. I have very little reps with Sandeep 1, and I have such a blast with Sandeep 2. It's just, I don't see a world where I would rather play it for power-wise, but if I just want to try it out and try to get reps to see if I can play it decently, I play it, but I'd say it's probably somewhere, honestly, C, maybe even D. I don't play it a lot, honestly.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. And then we get to talk about, I think, I mean, Pete, you slapped me pretty silly in about 5 minutes with this master in round 1 of Houston. You obliterated me, and I was on my try-hard list of Yoko 2 that I had been practicing with for like a month and a half straight, and the game took 5 minutes, and I looked at the board, and I looked at you, and I shook your hand, and I was like, all right, looks like you crushed me, Pete. All right, I guess I'll go get a drink and some breakfast.
Well, I think the funny thing out of that was you're like, oh yeah, they told me about this list, and I looked at it, and I kind of understood what it did, but once it was on the table, wow.
Yeah, it was quite the thing. So we won't bury the lead. Haku, why don't you talk a little bit about Sandeep 2, and then Pete, obviously, if you could give us your perspective on it as well.
All right. Yeah, Sandeep 2. Sandeep 2 is kind of the new hotness, as you alluded to. Some people have found a list that they're decently comfortable with, relying a lot on doing some silly shenanigans with Shockwave markers. And they're finding out that, hey, Shockwave markers are, kind of good. They're a little inconsistent, but, when you're dropping a 50 mil Pyre Marker and you're Shockwave 2ing from it, you're able to hit a lot of things. So if you're playing against a lot of these setup crews we've been seeing a lot of, ones that really like balling up, that can't really spread out as much, it's a really good way to just start getting in there. And doing it from a pretty safe distance. That being said, I am a little more down on this list than other people are. I as he said, we were kind of warning about it. I've seen it. It definitely is good. It's one of those things where I think it's great against people who aren't expecting it. And the more you play against it, the more you're able to play around it. And once you start playing around it, it's not as impactful, knowing what to hire against it and all of that. That being said, it's a great interrupt list, and it's a great tool for Arcanists to have to be like, are you sure you want to try to declare your ball crew with? Because I can just go kind of silly.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the Shockwave thing is what people are really familiar with, but that's just kind of the thing Sandeep does. He's obviously going to put down a crap ton of these Shockwaves, but it's also like, I don't care if you fail these. You're going to, just because of the just crazy amount of these. I think Sandeep himself can throw down like 5 Aetheric Control Actions a turn just because of all the out of activation actions you can do. But besides that, the Moment of Reflection is bonus, where you can grow up a little Gamin into like a Wind Gamin. So you save Soulstones that way. You also can just move, shield, heal models. So it's just, he's very flexible. And the other thing that's big about Sandeep too is he's an elemental. So anything that is in the keyword that says elemental can do this. Now Sandeep does it as well. So this allows a lot more shenanigans. His also Student of All ability is probably what makes him really superb, because you get all of these out of activation actions that you do. All you have to do is just activate an academic, pitch a card. Now an elemental can do an action, and it's targeted from that academic. So it allows some really cool lines of play. Like I've had it before where I activate Sandeep, I pitch a card, I say, cool, I'm going to do Banasuva's toss action. Somebody who was in, Sandeep's face is now 10 inches down the board. So you can play around the Shockwave game, but I would argue that's actually not the most dangerous part. That's the most obvious part of Sandeep. He's got a lot of answers, which is why I love playing him.
Pete, at a very high level, for somebody who's not familiar with the Sandeep 2 list, quote unquote, can you just give us like a 3-minute elevator pitch on what the heck is this list? What is it doing most of the time? And why is it the new hotness? Just for people that might not be aware of it.
Sure.
Can you just give us a quick rundown?
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of variation to this, because when I look at my Sandeep list, I actually probably have 20 different lists of this. So there's not one specific one, but the way it generally goes is obviously you have Sandeep 2. You're going to have Banasuva. I like to put Soulstone Cash on him because as we get to Banasuva, you're going to see he's a pretty big linchpin for what the crew does. I prefer the Shastar Guard. I know a lot of people don't like him because he's expensive and whatnot, but I put Magical Training on him. The Shastar Guard I love. We'll talk about him later. Then usually you bring the 4 Winds Golem just because of reasons when we get to him. I prefer bringing a huge Golem along with that. So whether it's your choice of the metal or the ice Golem, and then you can throw in another model. Usually Cassandra is the pretty big hot pick there because she can copy Sandeep's bonus. She helps with a lot of the scheming, and she's just kind of a pain in the butt in general. So that's generally the list. There's a lot of variations to it. Some people will throw a Wind Gamin in there, but it's a very tight bubble crew, but it's very mobile, and it reacts very well to what your opponent does.
Yeah. And I think a good point that you made, Pete, as well, is that it forces a ton of duels. And by virtue of forcing a ton of simple duels early and often, it drains your opponent's hand. I mean, when we played, I think my entire hand was gone by like the middle of turn 1, just because I had to cheat it to like win duels so my crew didn't die, which was like, that's quite the form of negative card advantage for your opponent.
And the reason why Sandeep's Shockwave game is just better is because, one, okay, you flipped a 12, you had to cheat in a 10. Okay, that's moderate and high cards that are going away. But here's the thing people need to realize as well. One, you're also putting hazardous terrain down, right? You're putting the Pyre Marker down. You're, putting pillars down to block lanes. That's all great. But something people forget about is this crew has the ability to put staggered out. Often I'll bring Kandara or other models to put staggered out. If you put staggered on a model, they're going to fail these flips, and it's going to be horrendous. And you can even do that staggered attack from Kandara. You can just activate Sandeep, pitch a card to say, I'm going to do Kandara's shot, give everybody staggered, and now you're taking 3 shockwaves to the face. So the best way is just to spread out and try to get out of the fire. It's just try to get out of there. That's what you got to do against Sandeep.
Yeah, and like spread out and not present a clustered target of nonsense.
And spoiler, Doug did not spread out.
No, yeah, that's why the game took about 4 minutes. All right, Joel, what do you got on Sandeep 2, my friend?
I don't have a lot of reps, but my experience has been very similar to Pete's. My list is similar. you're forcing your opponent to react to what you're doing at an early stage. Because if you have Sandeep in position to start bombing their deployment zone early turn one, they have to make modifications for that, right? It disrupts their unpack, it disrupts their plan. They either make changes to their plan
Or die.
or they lose, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And the markers Sandeep is dropping are pretty useful for your own crew. The Ice Golem can use them for suits, the Fire Golem uses them for armor, and the Metal Golem uses them to teleport. So not only are you getting those shockwaves, you're getting markers on the board where you want them.
Yeah, that's a good point as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I'll throw a marker down and it's not like there's no test my opponent has to take. I just need a model over there.
Yeah, you just need a thing in that general direction. All right, I think that's a good overview of Mr. Deep 1 and Mr. Deep 2. And on to the totem that you're always going to bring with you, Banasuva. Haku, what do you got on Banasuva?
Yeah, this guy's nasty. He's always been pretty nasty, and he's going to continue to be nasty. The biggest upside you have is he just dies, which, as you pointed out, isn't really a thing in Arcanist, because you just slap cash on him, and now he can't die again. But realistically, he is a pretty quick target that you kind of want to kill. Toss, obviously, I'll represent for Pope Darpa, is an insanely good ability for unpacking, getting your guys up there, getting Sandeep possibly in a position, more likely getting another guy in position so you can start doing early Shockwave shenanigans with line of sight, and the discards. And overall, all of his abilities are just really decent, and this is kind of why I think Sandeep 1 wasn't as statted as well on his attacks, because they kind of expect you to just use Banasuva for like the frontliner. But again, 5/5, 7 wounds. He does just die with with literally no defensive tech at all until you allow him to use Soulstones.
Yeah, Banasuva is not a front line. If you put Banasuva out there, if your opponent doesn't kill him, they're making a grievous error. It's just, this is, especially, I'm talking mostly from 2. I think 1 doesn't want him too far out there either, just because he's really a hot target. And it comes down to a couple things. His mantra is insane. Basically, that's the one where it says if you concentrate, you get to do your demise ability. And that's what really gets this clicking as we start to talk about the individual models. Like, that's where your places come in. That's where your markers come out. That's where just lots of different things start to pop off. And it's huge. And I use them mostly for the toss, if I'm being honest. It's just tossing my models into position or getting your threats away. In the Houston tournament, I played against Dixon because we caught each other in that huge tournament. And
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was pretty funny. I gave Doug a hard time about it, but so he brought in old Hinamatsu right into the middle of my crew because I had some armor stuff, and she's just a nasty model. So I just decided, you want to know what? It's not worth sending my points into this. I'm just going to toss her 10 inches into the deployment zone, and I didn't see her for the rest of the game, so that was fun. Lord of the Elements is the other big one. Once again, doing actions for elementals out of their activation is huge. And Breath of Fire is probably the other thing I do a lot of. Just random, like, I don't have anything else to do, Breath of Fire. Most time in Sandeep, though, you're going to notice that if you don't have a specific thing you need to do, you can always just concentrate to get effects.
And remember, your master's an elemental.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right? Is the new Sandeep 2, he's an elemental, so you can be like, hey, cool, throw another Pyre Marker down. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, they knew to remove Umbra for Ivan, but then they did not think this one through.
Yeah, or they did, and it's just intentional, and they want Sandeep to be the man.
Dude, and after doing a bunch of podcasts and stuff about this, about Sandeep specifically, and playing him in Houston, all 6 rounds, I'm so happy to hear people like, oh yeah, I picked up Sandeep because he sounds like a lot of fun, because as we get into this, it is a ton of fun.
Yeah, and he's got a good stable of models available to him. You guys will see as we talk. All right, Joel, you close us out on Banasuva. What do you got?
He's pretty nuts of everything you can possibly do with him. The key thing is that he can Lord of the Elements himself, and it's a bonus action. So that makes him effectively a 3 AP 4 AP model with Flurry, and you're paying 0 soul stones for this guy. So that's kind of bonkers when you think about it. It means he can do things like walk, walk, interact, or walk, interact, walk, or interact, walk, interact. But his weakness has been alluded to is if someone looks at him the wrong way, he's just dead. The other thing is with Sandeep 1, you can concentrate with him as a bonus action, which is really important because his mantra is one of the best ways to get your first scrap marker for Ride the Rails if you're taking the Metal Golem. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the Metal Golem.
Yeah, and Banasuva's activation, there's a lot of times, especially turn 1 and 2, where you can have like 3 models concentrate during Banasuva's activation because you pitch a card, say, hey, you over there, you concentrate. Banasuva is going to concentrate, and then I'm going to lower the elements to get somebody else to concentrate.
Yeah.
He's also important for getting your Gamin to do Gamin things.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I mean, it's an always hire because you always hire it. But now we are on to the first model that doesn't just come with the crew, I guess, depending on which version you hire. Let's chat a little bit about Kandara. Mr. Haku, what do you got on Kandara?
Well, Kandara has I Got Your Back and Serene Continents, and that's cool. Agile, cool, but its real thing is the mantra Wisdom, where when someone concentrate, you can look at the top card of your fake deck. If it's a non-joker tome, you can reveal and draw it. It's nice. It's a 1 in 4 time to draw. Overall, I was not the biggest fan of this model until someone pointed out to me that you just have built-in Divine Strike Throw Knife on your 13-move Shockwave guy.
Yeah, you sure do.
And so then I went, oh, that's what this model's for.
Yep.
And yeah, that's what this model's for. The rest of the stuff is like cute, but it's never was really good enough to get it into like the old Sandeep crews. Especially because it again is also another model that just kind of dies. Serene Continent's cool, but you're not terribly miffed. You're taking focus attacks and do a 5/5. Making them waste soul stones on negating and lowering to a negative. So now that I know all you do is just throw knives at people to Divine Strike them in an AoE in order to get staggered models to have shockwaves, the model makes a lot of sense, and I definitely see you hiring it most of the time when you're playing Sandeep 2. Probably still don't hire it in Sandeep 1.
Okay. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, so I ended up, when I first started playing the crew, I brought Kandara for the mantra, because I was like, cool, you get to draw cards, it lets you look at it, which actually I think just seeing the card, people underappreciate that, because there's been a lot of times where I activate her, I see it's the Black Joker, okay, I'm just going to do this action, I don't care if it goes off, okay, there's the Black Joker. So that just seeing a card is big, not even just drawing it. You just get to see it and then react off of what you can do with that. The biggest thing is the throwing knife with the Divine Strike. Sandeep 2 specifically, it's just nasty because, like I said, you can do it out of activation. You can do it during Sandeep's activation. So, and it doesn't say for Divine Strike, it doesn't have to be enemy only. So you can shoot your own model, pulse 2 off your own model. And yeah, that model is going to be staggered, but so is probably half of the opponent's crew if you're doing that. So yeah, throwing knife with Divine Strike is the big thing. The rest of it is fine. You find definitely situations for it, but that's the main. Plus, it's stat 7. I mean, why it's stat 7, I don't know, but it makes it really good.
Why this attack is stat 7, I don't know, but it is. So there we go. What's your gut on this model, Pete, in terms of where it would sit in a sometimes, always, never higher scenario for Sandeep 1 and or Sandeep 2?
For Sandeep 1, I don't think I would bring her as much in Sandeep 1. Maybe a sometimes higher, just because she is a solid model. Sandeep 2, I still put it as sometimes higher because, as we're going to see, this crew does get expensive, and there's a lot of pools where Cassandra is better than Kandara, or another model is better than Kandara in that situation. So, yeah, I mostly just bring her if I know I want to be super aggressive and stagger the crap out of everything.
Makes sense to me. All right, Joel, bring us home. What do you got on this one?
Yeah, I'd put her as a sometimes higher as well. She competes in most of my lists with Kudra and the Wind Golem for points. And I find in most matchups I'd rather either have Kudra or the Wind Golem. Her losing her aura was actually one of the bigger hits to Sandeep 1, just because the crew is so card intensive, especially in terms of the TNs for things that Sandeep and Banasuva want to do, that losing that card ended up hurting that crew quite a bit. It makes it much more difficult for them to do what they want to do. And I'd put her in sometimes higher for both versions of the Master.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we are on to the next one. Haku, talk to us about Kudra.
All right, my girl Kudra. I don't know. As Kudra's an interesting one. The mantra she gives out is shielded, but largely what she does is just have a pretty solid attack with butterfly jump and going in with arcane shielded and decent stats. You can move an enemy model sometimes with your bonus action, which is a decent bonus action, but it's not like an extra movement on this model, so it's not great at being enemy only. The healing is pretty tough for just a pulse 1 heal on a stat 5. So a lot of times you're just using it as a built-in onslaught 2, 3, 4, which is fine. I'm not the biggest fan of this model though, so I probably dodge most of the time. Would I go as bad as never higher?
That's okay.
You know what? I will.
I was gonna
As
say,
9
if you don't,
Soulstones,
if
I'm
you
just
don't,
gonna
I
go.
will.
I'm just gonna go never higher on this model. It's just I really think like everything it does is just kind of like subpar for its cost.
Savage. Haku's dancing around the never higher, and Pete just comes in slamming it on the desk. I mean, it sounds like you guys a little bit agree. Pete, what are your thoughts here? Both in 1 and or 2 and or neither 1 nor
Well, she
2, I
punches
guess.
people with snakes, so you know you kind of have to like elevate
Dude,
her
the
a
model
little
is
bit, right?
so sweet, and low key, I've always had like a super crush on like Princess Jasmine when I was growing up, So this kind of fills in that vibe where it's like, oh man, she looks really cool. Oh man, she's punching you with snakes. It doesn't do anything with the crew. It's like it's 2, 3, 4 with poison. Okay, she has onslaught, elemental blast. Okay, healing stuff for 1, fine. It's 9 soul stones. Maybe if she was 7, I'd think about bringing her. But for 9 soul stones, it's like a hard pass. She's not even in the realm of thinking about. I'd rather go out a keyword for 9 soul stones for whatever she can do.
Yeah, I think you guys make a fair point, and multiple of you have said it already a couple times, which is the crew can get expensive. There's some big boys you got to pay some soulstone points for here, and and I'm not sure Kudra is what you want to be spending your soulstone dollars on, but I don't know. Joel, what do you think? Bring us back around home on this.
I mean, we're trash talking a stat 6 model with a built-in onslaught. I mean, like, like so many keywords would just kill for that offense. I kind of like Kudra. I won't defend her to the auto include, but I think I will defend her to the sometimes matchup. She has an interesting combo with the Poison Gamin where she can dole out some poison, and then the Poison Gamin can activate and do some ping damage. And then if you're taking Sandeep 1 and you have her matched up with a Poison Gamin, you can discard a card and have her take one of the poison attacks. So she can stack up a lot of poison, which, is kind of meh, but does have some utility. I mean, this is a model that has a fair degree of mobility, and a pretty decent offense. And I think those are all pretty valuable in most pools.
I think, Joel, if they come out with like a sweet, poison golem that just really turns her on, I would be all about it. But I'm just not as excited with her and the poison gammon, so that's kind of why I'm like, meh. Plus, I don't have as many reps for 1.
The thing is that you essentially get the poison gammon for free, right? You're either summoning them with Sandeep 1 or you're transforming them with Sandeep 2. So the poison gammon isn't something you'd hire. It's just kind of a combo that's a little cute. She's probably gone down a little bit in GG4. In GG3, like half the strats were just be somewhere and not die, and Disillusion could move someone off a point pretty readily if you had the cards available. I'd still put her in some matchups because I think she does give the crew something that you can't find elsewhere, which is a good mobile hitty piece.
All right, so you're basically throwing your hat in the ring to argue for back of the bus of sometimes higher, effectively.
Yeah,
Wait,
something like that.
Did he just say Arcanist doesn't have good mobile hitty pieces?
All right, okay, all right. On to the next one, gentlemen. On to the next one. All right, we got Oxfordian Mage. Haku, what do you got?
I got some diligent students. These guys have always been, used to actually be decently clutch. I don't think they really are anymore. They've always been in this weird spot of sometimes being really amazing or just being kind of bad. But Elemental Bolt is cool, but they're stat 6, or I'm not stat 6. They're Soulstone cost 6. They're stat 5 models. They do just die, and Counterspell sucks nowadays. So nowadays meaning M3E. So
Nowadays,
it's been back for a while.
Haku.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna be the old man going back in my day. It didn't have a range.
Back in your day, huh, Haku?
Yeah, right. So either way, yeah, as one of the younger people on here.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to ignore that. Either way, Oxfordian Mage, I just they've always been a solid piece and like the respect of perfectly middling. And for that reason, I'd put them for competitive play, I'd put them on the lower end of sometimes, on the top of never.
Okay,
for 6 Soulstones, they exist and are a model that does relevant things. But that 6 Soulstone class has gotten so competitive lately, I just can't see it. They're not elemental, so they don't synergize with a lot of the fun things you want to do. So
okay, fair enough. Pete, what do you think? What's your take on both? And if their role is different in one or two, I'd be interested to hear from you.
So the Oxfordian Mages. So first off, since I play mostly Sandeep 2, I hate this model. The main reason is because, one, it is an academic, so you can do things off that, but it clunks up your activation order so much, because for the reason I would bring it in Sandeep 2 is purely for the getting rid of conditions, right? That Arcane Conduit. And it worked kind of when I played against Pandora, but honestly, you have to activate it early, and then Pandora can just kill it. Or the model that is, that it's really hurting, they can just kill it. It's easy to kill. So in Sandeep 2, I hate it. I never bring it. It's just, I'd rather work around conditions some other way. The healing is fine, but I found myself once again where it's like, I want to activate a model. It hasn't taken damage yet, so his mantra doesn't matter because I'm not actually healing. I would rather, I don't know, get a 2-inch push off of my preferred pick. I'm not going to say who it is yet. In Sandeep 1, though, I think being able to take conditions off your summons is pretty big. Because I think they come in, and Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they come in with slow or something. I can't remember. So that's beneficial to get rid of that, because then you can grow them up into a big golem, not slow. So I think it's useful there. Maybe a sometimes higher in Sandeep 1. I never hire this in Sandeep 2. It's not doing anything that I like.
Yeah. Very fair. Very fair. All right, Joel, what do you got on these guys? Any enlightening last comments before we move right on to the next one?
I think they're never higher for Sandeep 2. They don't really do anything. For Sandeep 1, kind of depending on your game plan, they have a spot. To open up with, you have 2 eligible magical training mules in this keyword. You have the Oxfordian Mage and you have the Vidiya Guard. And I think 75% of the time you're taking the Vidiya Guard. If you feel like the game is going to kind of come down to a scrum in the middle, and you're going to bring Sandeep 1 and you're going to ram 2 or 3 golems in your opponent's face, I think the Mage is a good pick because he keeps those golems alive for longer. I mean, an Ice Golem can focus heal 2, smash something again with 2 built-in rams, and then just pick up that pillar, and now your Ice Golem's healed 4 at minimum. And that's pretty solid, especially for a model that has 10 health and armor 2, and probably has a bit of shielded on it to boot. So these guys have some play in Sandeep 1, depending on your game plan.
Yeah, that's a very
I
fair
actually
point.
got Elemental Transference off once. I managed to slow Euripides with an Elemental Transference, and I think it won me the game, actually. So
That's hilarious.
it was beyond hilarious.
All right. I mean, you mentioned them, so we'll go to them next. Also, because they were next on the list. But I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. Is it Vidiya Guard? The Shastar Vidiya Guard? Is that how you pronounce that?
I just call him the Shastar.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna try to pronounce Indian names correctly.
All right, Haku, why don't you give us your overview on that?
I think, as people already alluded to, this is a very slept-on model, and I think Know the Warrior is just disgusting. Okay, I think that's all I had to really say
really
about
good.
this model. Know the Warrior is one of the most disgusting abilities they've ever made, and don't get me wrong, it's not as disgusting as when you see it on like McCabe 2 in your crew drawing infinite cards, but it's still pretty close to doing it on a model that's only 8 soulstones.
Yeah,
like
really
8 soulstones, hard to
10.
kill, 6/6. This model doesn't die easily. The fact that whenever someone decides to take a concentrate action, they can move. It's a really strong disengagement tool. To just be like, oh, my focus not only, gives me focus and all these other stupid things my crew allows me to do, it also disengages me so that I can charge who I actually want to charge, get on the position, move to interact, all the different fun shenanigans that free disengagement allows you to do. And then worst comes to worst, you just throw chakrams at people, and as long as you're not at a negative flip, you can just cheat your lowest card and just be like, woohoo. Remember, it also works anytime they target you. So every time you're attacked, you can just be like, I'll throw out a low card. Why not? And so this card's really disgusting. Also, Follow My Path is just, really good as well. Just a TN list, range 6, move 2. Can't target itself. Fine, whatever. I would probably put this as always higher. The main reason being alluded to is the fact that you can slap Arcane Reservoir on these guys, and if you're hiring a minion, I don't know how often you're hiring another living minion in this crew. Silent One's always good, always, but
And you're
when in
usually-
doubt, you can just have this guy, slap it on him. He's your minion for your Arcane Reservoir.
You're usually looking for one of these guys in your list, or would you say you're usually looking for 2 in this list? It feels like you probably want like one of these guys, right? Not necessarily more than that.
I'll let the list experts argue about that. I don't feel like you're going to have a downside having multiple. I think specifically in Sandeep 1. Sandeep 2, you're going to start seeing more downsides the more you get away from elementals. You don't really need the overlapping mantras that much. And so I think the value you're getting from it isn't going to be amazing unless you really need some extra out of activation movements or movements from. Maybe it's just like a really terrible map. But arcs have options for that. And I think realistically, you're just looking for minions that are allowing you to get some cards as well as enabling you to have Arcane Reservoir. And this guy can be pretty safe with hard to kill and a range 10 enabling that, and doesn't mind too much going forward either.
Fair enough. All right, Mr. Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm talking mostly from Sandeep 2, but playing games with Sandeep 1, I always bring the Shastar guard in both of those masters. He's just, as an Arcanist player, you're almost drawn to bring, magical training, right? You want the extra card, you want all that fun stuff. So he is the pick for that in Sandeep 2 specifically. You could even do it for Sandeep 1. This dude is stat 6 on defense and willpower for whatever reason, because, hey, he's 8 soulstones, I guess. But he's also got Arcane Shielded 1, which will be Arcane Shielded 2 with the upgrade. He's hard to kill, so he doesn't get that surprise you're dead, attack. He can take a red Joker, and it's just like, okay, I'm down to 1 hit point. And then you activate Sandeep 2, heal him up, 4, and he's back in the game. The big thing is Know the Warrior, like Longton said. I find myself drawn to those models that have Know the Warrior because guess what? It's really good. But the other 2 small tech things that Longton didn't talk about was on his balance sword. Once again, it's stat 6, and so is his chakram. Stat 6 on a minion, really good. But he has armor piercing, so I found myself using that as just like, oh, you have armor. Let me get this high tome to kill your armor piece. Because you hit 4 and 5 damage. It's pretty decent. The chakram, though, I've used that to snipe out some like models hiding in the back. You just hit a crappy defense model. It has a built-in ricochet, so you just hey, I might kill this minion that's just sitting over there by itself that I can't quite reach. And, that works a lot. But the mantra can't be ignored as well. This helps with your unpack. This helps get you out of situations. It helps get into situations. I've had times where it's like the Ice Golem. He's a 1-inch reach guy engaged. I'm going to concentrate with him, push him 2. Now I'm in range where I can smack you twice with my big fist with a focus. So, yeah, I'm bringing this every time. It's a really good option for Sandeep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Joel, are you rocking the boat here, or do you agree with your fellow Arcanist players?
No, I agree. There auto includes with Sandeep 2 where you don't have many sources of out of activation movement, or at least fewer than Sandeep 1. With Sandeep 1, I think you're probably taking them 75% of the time. There is some odd game plans where you'd rather have the healing from the Ox Mage, but most of the time you're going to want everything that both Haku and Pete have alluded to with the Vidiya.
Okay, cool. I'm glad we agree. All right, on to the next one. The Essence of Power. Haku, this is obviously the best model ever made, right?
Yeah, I hire it and everything, It's just one of those models where you're like, oh god, what do I need? More power. I don't really know what you want me to say about this model. Never hire it, probably, in anything, ever. It's always cute. I've gone out of my way to try to find, like, a lot of things where it's like, I can justify a 4 Soulstone cost to get some extra positive duels by using Soulstones. And most of those were old Hoffman lists, where you were already getting positives from swarms using Soulstone caches, building in Onslaught, or Peacekeeper building in Rams, and you just want all the positives in the world. And you go, man, we technically have tools for the job models if you're really that desperate. It just doesn't do anything. I'm just going to start harping on it. I really wanted this to be a better model. Amplify is a really interesting ability. But it's you have to hire this model that gets one shot by so many
by
models.
everything.
Just an obscene amount of models. So
Yeah.
no, never hire ever.
Fair enough. Pete, what's your 2 cents on this one?
Never hire, pass.
Fair enough. Joel, what's your 2 cents on this one?
Spend 4 Soulstones on something else.
Fair enough. Fair enough. This is to the point and direct, gentlemen. I'm here for it. Okay, so
I'll say this. I'll say one last thing in favor. If this potentially existed in another faction, it could make sense. Because one of the biggest problems you have in Arcanist is you can slap Soulstone Cache on somebody, and now your Soulstones become godlike. So wasting 4 Soulstones on a model that just dies when those 4 Soulstones could just be the 4 Onslaught triggers or the 4 Crit Strike triggers, or
just
God,
a dead
it's
horse
just
with a
so
baseball
tough
bat
to pass that up.
as hard as you
Stop!
can.
He's already dead.
Stop talking. He's dead. Stop. All right.
All
So let's start with Ice, Fire, and Metal Gamins. Haku, go.
Yeah, so we're just going to mention all the elementals all the elemental gamins that turn into golems at first once, and so I'm going to rate them on how I think they are relevant for summoning for Sandeep 1. Sandeep 2, it really just comes down to which gamin do you want to hire to make into a bigger, better gamin. Largely, I think for that, obviously, you tend to want to take the lower cost gamin because you're raising it by 2. And so you can just have the 4 Soulstone ones turn into, the 5 or 6 Soulstone ones. So there's not much weight in going all the way up to a Metal Gamin, for example. So I think Fire Gamin is one of the better Gamin. Flame Blast is a ranged attack. Most of the time you're not actually keeping these guys around. You're just immediately turning something better, which is why generally, Sandeep 1, I think you're going to be hiring a lot of Ice Gamin, because a lot of people tend to prefer the Ice Golem, because it just has a really good damage track. You got some healing, the Hazardous Aura, you can do some fun things with that. And, yeah, I don't really know how I don't know when to stop talking about these Gamins.
Fair enough. Oh,
how we're going to rank them now that I'm thinking about this more.
We'll have Pete relieve you. Pete, so we're talking about this in context of... Ice Gamin, Fire Gamin, and Metal Gamin, and their usages on the tabletop and or if you're looking to use them for things, or just turn them into golems. What's your thought?
So I think Sandeep 1, you're probably looking more at ice because you probably hire one or two of them, summon another one, combine them into the ice golem, and then you're probably just with Sandeep 1 puking out as many poison gammon as you can to try and, blow them up and kill things. So I think they're actually pretty important. Sandeep 1's just play what you're planning on doing. You want to use the gammon to either create a bigger golem or to spam them to die and create their demise effects, right? So I think that they're in Sandeep 1, the gammon specifically are going to always see play, just because that's kind of what he does. He moves them around, manipulates, and then blows up when they're done with them. So I think you always see some form of the gammon, but I think the ice and the poison gammon are probably the most common. Maybe you puke out a wind gammon to go scheme, so that's also something. But with Sandeep 2, I think they're sometimes higher. You don't always hire gammon with Sandeep 2 just because things get expensive and you don't always have the 4 soul stones to then grow it up into a wind gammon. Sandeep 2 most of the time wants a wind gammon just to help with placing and to help with some of the scheming. But I find I usually hire the ice or the fire gammon just because they're 4 soul stones. They're the cheapest. Depending on which way you flex with the golem you're going to go to, then you can at least put out some pyre, or you can put out some ice pillars for whatever golem you brought with you in Sandeep 2. So the gammon are definitely sometimes higher with Sandeep 2, and I would say they're always going to be on the board with Sandeep 1, even if you don't hire them.
Yeah, even if you don't hire them, they're part of your crew, basically. Yeah, that makes sense. Any specific like play lines or cheeky moves or areas where if you see a specific opponent or you see a specific map or you see a specific scheme pool that you're like, oh man, this is great for XYZ model? I know you mentioned Windgammon a little bit, and those guys are probably like, they're pretty good at scheming, they got leap.
Yeah, and GG4, I mean, the Windgammon were good last time because their demise lets you place a model. So that's just good. And with Sandeep 2, they can concentrate and do that. So that's really good. And with all the schemes that you can do, you need to be in the corners, you need to be in the far deployment corner. They're just good to run off and go do things on their own.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Joel, bring us home on the gammons. You got any gammon-related activity or opinions that you'd like to air for the internet?
With Sandeep 1, I find myself taking one of two game plans. Either I'm going to bring in 2 golems, or I'm going to bring in 1 golem and poison gammon. If you're going with the first plan with 2 golems, you typically want to hire 1 ice and 1 fire, and then summon in the other 2 to make the golem. If you only plan to bring in 1 golem, you're probably taking 2 ice, unless you're up against a keyword that you know is going to have a lot of armor piercing, in which case you probably want the 2 fire. The fire gammon can build up a lot of burning before they combine into the golem, and then you're going to have a fire golem that's in with like 8-10 burning, which is effectively armor 2 at that point. So that's kind of the trick there. With Sandeep 2, you probably want the ice. Well, you probably want the ice gammon because you probably want ice pillars to block up charge lanes or line of sight, right? With the idea that eventually you're going to grow them into poison or wind gammon.
Yeah, that's fair. So basically what I'm hearing from all of you guys is that they're a component of the crew. You're usually looking to hire some number of them to kind of Chia Pet style grow them into a golem, and most of the time, yeah, that's kind of where their value is.
Yeah, so now that we got the summoning gammon out of the way, / the upgrading ones for Sandeep 2, you mentioned briefly you might hire 1 gammon in Sandeep 2. I think you're still never hiring this guy in Sandeep 1. Don't get me wrong, 6 Soulstone Leap is nice, but there are other things you can do, and these guys do also just die, because they don't have the greatest of stats in the world. And so it's not a really reliable scheme runner. And for that reason, I tend to, a lot of the time you're using it for, its demise ability as stated or something like that, and you don't really want to invest 6 soul stones into that. But, when blessed, perfectly fine. Sometimes you use on your own models and severe them, and it's really funny. So I would put it closer to the top end of never hire, honestly. Maybe even for both. I'm not the biggest fan of hiring this in SAMD2. The justification of not just hiring a 4 Soulstone and upgrading it is a little brutal to me.
Savage, Haku. All right, Pete, Joel, you guys got any parting thoughts on the Gammers before we move to the Goalers?
Yeah, the Gamin, once again, it's one of those things where you don't ever hire it because you can just save 2 Soul Stones and turn it into a Gamin turn 1 with Sandeep 2. And you're bringing it specifically for the to the sky demise, so that way you can just place models 4 inches and just kind of really extend the threat of your scary models.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. I mean, you in fact did that to me in the process of deleting Doug Brecker from round 1.
True story.
Joel, you got any parting thoughts on the Gammers?
I think the Windgamon's worth a hire in Sandeep 1. They're good scheme runners. You have a lot of stuff on 50 mils that you can get kind of tangled up with, so their demise is pretty valuable. And the other side of that is you have a lot of stuff on 50 mils you can hide behind with a Windgamon. So I would put them as auto-include for Sandeep 1. I think you're pretty much always going to want one. With Sandeep 2, you don't hire them. You just transform into them.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we are on to the, in my opinion, 4 of the spiciest, most fun models in this keyword, the Golems. These are kind of
I just real quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Poison Gammon never hire for everyone as well.
Never hire.
Yeah, fair enough. I actually skipped.
Just had to say it out loud.
Yeah. You're right. I saw it on the call sheet and I crossed it off and didn't say anything, and I think that speaks volumes. So yeah, good call out, Mr. Haku. Thank you. All right, so now we're on to the golems. We can let's just kind of start. I'll just pick one at random and we'll talk about it. Let's talk about the metal golem. Haku. He's a big metal boy.
Yeah, never hire. If you play Mayfang, cool model. If you don't play Mayfang, it just dies, and 5+ is nice on a 3/4/6, but I don't know. You're not really doing the things you are protecting it that you're doing in Mayfang, and you're not doing the alphaing with it or getting. You can still get the scrap markers out, but I think your preference is not scrap markers.
Spicy. All right, what do you think, Pete? You have a better opinion of this metal boy?
I don't think you bring the Metal Golem ever with Sandeep 1. I think Longton's probably wrong about Sandeep 2, though, because I bring him quite a bit.
I think you had him when we played, literally in your crib.
I did. And so there's a couple reasons, and I do like the other golems in other spots, and keep in mind, in Sandeep 2, I always bring 2 of the big golems. I always have 2 of the big boys. I like the big boys in Sandeep 2. So it's not like I'm not bringing another golem. I'm bringing 1 golem and another golem. The other golem will always be a hire. We'll talk about that soon. But then I kind of go between the other 3. So where I like the metal golem is where I think I can get use off of Vent Steam. Because remember, when I'm discarding a card with Sandeep 2 to do an action, the line of sight's drawn from the academic. So you can put up Vent Steam on academics as well as the metal golem. So you can actually have 2 pockets of Vent Steam if you can really punish your opponent for that, which I've done. And then also putting out Stunned is good with Sandeep's Aetheric Control, but that also lets you teleport the metal golem 2 places. So there's been times where I'm playing somebody who's a little cagey. I wait till last activation. Boom, there's a metal golem in your face. You got to deal with it. Vent Steam's up. Your whole crew has to deal with it. And off the rails always helps too. That helps get him in and out of spots. And there's going to be scrap markers if I'm playing him because I can do it with Aetheric Control. He just kind of poops them out when he concentrates. So it makes it where he's very mobile and you can get him to specific spots. He's probably less good in GG4. He was really good when you needed him on like guard the stash or you needed him on, in a middle point. He was really good at that, and he could kind of hold it down. And Sandeep does protect him well. You got to remember, Sandeep's bonus, you get to do twice, and you can put shielded on him. You can heal him up. You can move him. And if you bring Cassandra, you can do that all again. So he really does have a spot in Sandeep too, but he has very specific roles when you bring him.
Yeah, and I literally watched you pilot that model in the way that you're describing, and it was effective to me.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
you had
it was-
armor-piercing models. It's not like I just threw them to you. I actually put them behind like a height 5 like boulder or something,
Yeah,
and
you pushed
then
him off to the side and made him a problem for next to turn Doug. But the joke's on you, Pete. We didn't even get there. I scooped before.
Yeah, so sometimes hire in Sandeep 2, and then never hire for 1 is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Joel, what do you got on the big metal boy?
I love the big metal boy.
Yeah.
I take this guy every game, regardless
go,
if I'm playing
Joel.
Sandeep 1 or 2. I mean, Sandeep 1, you can prompt this guy twice a turn, so he can essentially go off the rails 3 times if he wants. I mean, he can attack 4 times in a turn if he wants. You slap Soulstone Cache on this bad boy, he's almost impossible to bring down between the amount of shielded and armor and damage reduction you have. With Sandeep 2, you can set up an alpha using the scrap markers, and then you can give him the ability to take damage to add a suit, because he has very good triggers. The only thing about the Metal Golem that's kind of poopy is his attack is only stat 5, but since you have a built-in positive, you're probably cheating second most of the time, even with the stat disadvantage. So I'll say that I love this guy. With Soulstone Cache, there's just so many crews that can't deal with him, and you just park him in the middle of your opponent's crew, you vent steam, and you watch Bayou Gremlins just melt.
Are you always
glorious.
bringing him, Joel, or is it a sometimes for you?
I always bring the Metal Golem. I mean,
Nice.
I guess there's probably a few games where I haven't because I knew my opponent was going to have a lot of anti-armor, but I'm a big fan of this guy.
Joel's the metal golem stan.
I am.
I love it. Because
That's
everybody does. Everybody trashes the Metal Golem, and it's purely because he's slow and, stat 5, and I think he gets a bad rep for that. So a lot of people do kind of like look down on him from their tower.
I mean, you're getting a lot of 2-inch pushes with him if you're playing Sandeep 1. And if you're playing Sandeep 2, you have scrap markers on a stick, and you can build in the trigger for vent steam, so you're risking a bit less. I really like this guy. I'd put him as auto-include.
Whoa. Holy shit. All right. Fair enough. All right. Let's talk about one of my favorite models in this entire keyword, the Four Winds Golem. This guy's got to be trash, right? Probably the worst model ever made. Haku?
Yeah, definitely. So you know why you don't really need to hire Wind Golem or Wind Gamins is because you have the Four Winds Golem. Kind of, not really. I mean, the Demise of the Sky is obviously amazing. The rest of this guy's card is just really stupid.
Stupid
up we
good, just to
go.
be clear,
Yeah,
right?
it's fire.
Up we,
Yeah.
it's lit. It's lit, fam. No, yeah, up we go. Obviously, is insane. Stat 3 makes it even more bonkers. You're moving people around, especially in GG3, as was pointed out, which was really position based. It was huge. That's not as needed anymore. He might fall out of favor a little bit, but not by enough to matter. Because honestly, as good as that was, you were generally going early-ish with this guy, so you weren't doing it too often to actually deny points. It's more to just be a general nuisance, pain in the ass, kidnap models. Wind Blast is also really strong with built-in collision. It's kind of nutty. And remember, you can use that against friendly models because why not, to get guaranteed pings. Leap is very strong when it's suited. Not sure why it's suited, but cool. Just give everything to this guy. So yeah, I would probably I doubt I would ever not hire him. I would easily auto include them, probably both.
Yeah, he seems very good. Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, staple him onto Sandeep's crew every game. So, and not only that, I usually bring the Soulstone Cache with him because getting suits, and also I go hunting models with the Four Winds Golem. So when I kill them, I get Soulstones back.
Pete's like, you're locked in here with me, not the other way around.
I got you for 5 minutes. So collision's the big thing. He's actually my hard to kill tech, right? Because he can damage them, bring them down to 1, and then the collision trigger will kill them. So any model that has hard to kill, I'm kind of eyeballing the Four Winds Golem. he did some real hard work on. I played against the Vix, and they have a lot of hard to kill stuff, and the Four Winds Golem just kind of chewed him up. He's also a very sneaky remove markers. He has a Gale Force trigger that you can push a model, and anything they go through just kind of goes away. And yeah, he's the golem that I'm going to bring every game. He's just flexible. And in Sandeep 2 specifically, his demise helps unpack your crew a lot. So like when you bring the ice golem or, the metal golem or the fire golem and you want to get them to a spot to go punch things in the face, the Four Winds golem helps them get there. So he's not only great to mess with your opponent and win the day, he's also really good at setting up your other beaters.
Yeah, he's great. Joel, what do you think? Crappiest model in Malifaux?
Not by a long shot. I put him in sometimes higher just because every time I've taken one of these, it just dies. The kind of models he wants to go after tend to be smaller minions, but it's not that uncommon for minions to have damage spikes up in the 4 or 5 range. And without any static damage reduction in defense 5, it just goes down so quickly. That's why I kind of put Kudra above the Four Winds Golem in general, because Kudra has better defense. But yeah, it's great. Everything that Pete and Haku have mentioned is definitely true. I just think in general, I prefer models with a bit more defense.
Yeah, it also has Chi that gets it positive flips. I forgot to mention that too, because that's really good.
Yup.
Yeah, Chi is really good.
Yup.
The other thing to keep in mind is Middle of the Storm is really fun. Take that against a Cooper or a Seamus player and just watch them die inside.
Yep.
Especially when you stack it on top of armor and their, 6 damage shot does 0 damage to your armor 2.
Yeah.
Gamin. It's just glorious.
Yeah. Story of Rajan has that out of, I was playing that model for the defensive buff for the exact same reason.
Yeah, when we played, Doug, you brought Fuhatsu, and I had this position where it was like, oh, Fuhatsu did like 4 damage or whatever, and I was like, cool, I'm going to take 1.
Yeah, like literally nothing. I like shot
Just
you
watch-
once, moved a couple of models, and then had 20 million fire markers on me and died. That was our game. All right, let's do Fire Golem next. Fuck it, why not? Haku, Fire Golem, what's the deal?
I'll just give my hot take. Ha
Oh.
Better than Metal Golem. Get fucked.
Wow.
Yeah, you're already. You know what? I don't care. The model's perfectly good. You're generally laying down Pyre Markers as the shockwaves you're doing in Sandeep 2. Sandeep 1, I can definitely see being more negative on the Fire Golem, and I probably would be. Sandeep 2, though, you're dropping around a lot more of the Pyre Markers. You're getting this guy moving around. He also can just, have a pretty decent Shockwave attack. It's technically better than the Pyre Marker dropping one, because it hands out an additional burning. And, getting rid of Scheme Markers is kind of insane, as we learned from pretty much everyone who has this ability. So if you have the Crow, he's a great Scheme Marker removal. We're going to be seeing that a lot in GG4, I believe. So the fact that you can do this with a Henchman, I guess you can't. I mean, you slap the Soulstone, but you can do it through line of sight of other models. You don't get their Henchman ability. I'm delusional. Cut this out. You can slap the Soulstone again, you draw the line of sight through other models, and you just get the Crows down. Whatever, who cares? His attack is better because it's actually Sat 6. That Sat 5 plus non-set is not equal to Sat 6. Get out of here. And yeah, draw off the flame is a really good bonus action.
Fair
and
enough.
the guy just doesn't die.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of reps on this, not just with this crew, but I mean you also played a lot of Kaeris 1 and 2 as well. So
yeah, so I have a clear and obvious bias.
yeah. All right, Pete, what do you think? What's your take?
Sandeep 1, maybe sometimes higher, depends on which way you like flexing with it. I in Sandeep 2, I actually found myself hiring him more. It's still in the sometimes higher because I think, like I said, in Sandeep 2, I think the golems are very situational in the matchup and what you want to do in the game. The fire golem is definitely not just going to punch you. He is anti-scheming. He's positional. He's putting out a crap ton of burning in addition to what Sandeep is doing. So you're just watching your crew's health pool just kind of evaporate. But I found myself bringing the fire golem more and I think the more people play against Sandeep 1 or 2, mostly 2 at this point, they're going to notice a lot of armor. So I think there's going to be more anti-armor coming at Sandeep. And that's why I actually like the fire golem, because that provides you an opportunity of like, I don't care that you ignore armor. I have my fire to protect me. So I actually found myself liking the fire golem more. And he's actually pretty mobile on his own. He just has to reduce fire. There's a lot of models in Sandeep that don't take fire damage, even if they are burning. So it allows him to not only get that fire that would be uselessly just kind of sitting there, but it also buffs him up for damage reduction. So yeah, he's really good.
Mr. Joel, bring us home.
I'd say he's probably the worst of the 4 golems.
Just to antagonize Longton.
Look, he said out loud, Kudra is better than
Oh
the
my
4 wins
God.
golem. So I'm
I said
out.
she was more
I'm out.
survivable.
This man's opinion means nothing to me. I'm out.
I mean, I really like the fire golem with Kaeris, when you can dole out a lot of burning pretty easily throughout just both sides of the crews. But I think with Sandeep, it's harder to get that much burning out. I haven't played.
Have you seen the amount of Pyre Markers dropped in a Sandeep 2 crew?
Yeah, it's quite crazy.
So, well, what I would say though, in Joel's defense here, when I bring the fire golem, I do in Sandeep 2, I do hire a fire gamin as well, because I use the fire gamin to get the burning going on the fire golem. Because if you don't do that, Sandeep doesn't want to put, he doesn't want to put those Pyre Markers in his crew. He wants to put them out. So you use Banasuva and you use the Gamin to get the fire going for the fire golem. So it is something that you can do. I just usually bring a Gamin to help facilitate it.
Yeah, so that's one thing you can do. But now you're paying 14 stones for that golem, right?
I mean, but then it turns into a win Gamin, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, but possibly even 16 if you're putting Soulstone Cash on it. I'm not sure. I think in general the ice golem is going to deal out more damage. The metal golem is going to be a little bit tankier unless your opponent's crew can ignore armor easily. And so I just don't see a huge spot for this. But I haven't tried him out that often. He's very good with Kaeris. Definitely good with Wildfire. Just less useful.
Fair enough. We got one more big fella, and then we're on to the OOKs and versatiles. Haku, talk to us about ice golems.
Ice Golem is probably the best golem for punching things, because it punches things really well. That's about it. If you want to kill things on point control, Ice Golem's your guy. It's the other reason why I'm not the biggest fan of Metal Golem. Because technically you can get the hazardous aura on this guy as well. But Fence Team obviously has its positives.
Yeah, your crew doesn't ignore the hazardous, though. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I had a game where literally me and my opponent spent the turn pushing the ice golem back and forth because the blizzard was up.
That sounds like such a fun minigame. He has the coolest model sculpt out of the whole entire crew, because you can play the Festivus Arbors. What other fun facts can I say about this? Just make December good again, please, guys. I'm begging you. And by again, I mean once ever in the history of Malifaux.
That's really fun.
But no, not even really joking. 3-4-6 Frozen Smash. You can get it built in, not too hard, because you're going to want to drop some Ice Pillar markers normally, because blocking off lanes is really strong. Pulsing out slow, kind of more meh. But can also be potentially really strong if you're hitting enough people off that 30 mil. At any point, you can slapping the rams on this guy is great. So you just go in, punch people, you do obscene amount of damage, especially if you actually succeeded in the slow TN. You just go up to it, grab it, mid-5 a guy, and that's disgusting. So if I was pointed out really well, and if you've been paying attention to everything we said, they all have all the golems have different situations and what they're actually good in. The more you play the crew, the more you're going to find out which ones you actually want to slot in and out. I wouldn't actually be terrible at putting all of them in sometimes because they really can slot different golems in and out of this crew as needed. You want a guy that can just go in there and murder, or Boris is generally better. The point control with Vent Steam on multiple models is really strong. Throw Golem in there. Fire Golem is the in-between kind of hybrid between the two. And then 4 Winds is just stupid good.
Yeah, 4 Winds is just, you just always auto-hire that, basically. All right. What do you got, Mr. Pete? How do you feel about this icy boy?
I feel like in Sandeep 1, it's always summoned. Like, you don't hire it, obviously, but I think it always gets summoned. That's what I would do if I played Sandeep 1 a bunch. Sandeep 2, the Ice Golem's actually getting pretty close into the never hire for me. And it's not because he's not good. It's because against newer players or against players who don't know Sandeep, the Ice Golem's just going to wreck them because, like Longton was saying, you get min 5 damage, you're just smashing models and they just evaporate and you just run over your opponent. Against somebody who knows the matchup and knows the Ice Golem specifically, I found he either gets neutered or he just dies because they bring irreducible or armor piercing, and he's only defense 4. I mean, he dies so easily when the tech is there. Like, I got somebody double mastered Shenlong into me, and I wanted to see how bad it was, and it was bad. So, yeah, I think the Ice Golem is good, but in Sandeep 2, I'm kind of leaning towards not hiring him as much because he's so counterable that it becomes bad when he's countered. Like, he's only movement 4, so he really depends on the Wind Gamin or Golem to move him around. And then it's this whole game of, can you get him into the spot? And if your opponent is smart, they're not going to let you get him in a good spot. And that's why I kind of lean never higher anymore with Sandeep 2, even though I recognize he's still good. But he relies on other models a lot.
Yeah, those are some very salient points there, Mr. Pete. Joel, you're the last word, my man.
Pete's got it right. This guy in Sandeep 2 needs a lot of kind of hand holding. He needs a guard to sort of follow his path so he can get anywhere. With Sandeep 1, he's a very valid summon, and in fact one that I would tend to tilt towards over the Fire Golem, just on the basis of pure damage output. But in that case, you're shooting that Golem, almost 12 inches up the field, given the way that Sandeep summons work. So it's a bit of a, you're cheating a little bit there. There is one time when you should always hire the Ice Golem, and that's if you're up against Euripides. Pro tip.
Fair.
That's hilarious. Yep.
It's also hilarious when Thune turns an Ice Golem into an ice pillar. That's happened to me.
That's funny. All right. I think we did it, gentlemen. We got through the keyword. So now we've got, I'm looking at it, it's probably like 10 or so models for out of keywords and versatiles.
Pete just didn't bother to read the keyword.
So we've got, we'll start with the 2 masters. So we have 2 masters that are second master hires that are in here that I think are worth a discussion. And for these masters, I think we don't need to rate them really because I think that you're bringing them in for specific purposes. I think more we just kind of chat about why they would be included in whatever. And so the first of these 2 masters, we talked about her a little bit already. Let's talk about one of my favorite Arcanist masters, Kaeris. So what's the deal? I guess who was the one that raised their hand and wanted this on the list? I'll let them start with it.
I think it was me.
All right, Pete, why don't you give us why? Kaeris, why?
So I don't like Kaeris personally as a keyword, but I do love her as a second master with Sandeep because Sandeep's putting out a crap ton of Pyre Markers, and guess what? Yeah, specifically Sandeep 2. Sandeep 1, I don't think you do this, but Sandeep 2, you have a crap ton of Pyre Markers out. So I think Kaeris also loves Pyre Markers. They're already where they're supposed to be, and now it's a lot of things that you already kind of want to be doing. And I think there's actually it's more beneficial probably to actually, and I haven't played with this as much, so I don't have the reps to know which one's better yet. But I think Kaeris being the leader is probably better, just so you also put injured out. So that's just something to kind of think about.
And they can't ignore if she's leader, right?
Yeah.
So then you
So
hire
especially if you're
Sandeep
playing against
to
like
do it.
incorporeal like crews, this would be something that I'd be kind of thinking about if I was going against Rezzers. So
Yeah, I would hate seeing that. As one of my Rezer is one of my primary
oh
factions.
no, it's Kaeris. Oh no, it's also Sandeep too. Crap.
Yeah, holy shit, that'd be awful. I'm thinking through that and how bad that would be if I was running like Kirai and then you show up with like Kaeris with Sandeep 2 in tow. I'm like, oh fuck me, god damn it. That's pretty funny. But that's the general gist, right? Pyre Marker good, Pyre Marker extra
And
good when Pyre
it's
Marker
actually
non-ignorable.
it's the same thing with Rasputina because that's the other model we'll talk about. But yeah, that's the main thing with Kaeris.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Mr. Joel, Mr. Haku, you guys got anything you want to add for the Kaeris conversation here?
I find it cute. As a person who advocates for both of those crews, Second Master Sandeep, I can definitely see it helping turn on Kaeris 1. Especially because you're dropping the Pyre Markers under anyone, and you really don't have Pyre Marker generation in that crew. Weirdly enough. As for Rasputina, yeah, anything's better than hiring Rasputina's crew.
Thanks, Haku. Joel, you got anything spicy for us?
I've always thought about it. I've never tried it. I thought about taking all three masters, take Sandeep, Rasputina, and Kaeris,
Yeah.
and just see how many markers you can bomb on the board.
With
I've
our
never done
powers combined.
Oh my god. All right,
Just
cool.
just hire silent ones. It's the same as having Rasputina, right? Just two
This is the
silent
part-
ones is the same thing.
This is the part where people just turn off the episode. They're like, these guys are fucking crazy. All right, so Pete, talk to us a little bit about how Rasputina would be used.
I mean, so Raspi is kind of like the same deal, right? Where it's like if you want to focus heavy on the pillars, on the ice pillars, Rasputina is kind of, you know, your gal where it's like, okay, I want to flex super heavy into that. Let's pair her up with Sandeep. Yeah, and I mean, there's just some kidnap capabilities there. I forget. I think it's with the second version that pushes you if she attacks you through the ice pillar or whatever. I don't play Rasputina a lot. I just know that there's some combos there that I've seen that I know would pair well with Sandeep.
Yeah.
I'm flexing into Rezzers right now for GG4, so I put
Oh.
Sandeep. I put Rasputina and all my thoughts of double masters, you know, away for a little bit. But as GG4 gets a little more seasoned, I'll bust Sandeep back out for sure and try it.
Nice. All right, Haku, Joel, anything on Rasputina before we move on?
Nope.
So if you get the alt sculpt of Rasputina 2, she looks really cool, and I'm big fan of that Wonderland look.
I mean, you are right. It is a very cool sculpt. All right, cool. All right. Into the out of keywords and versatiles. I'm going to start with one of my favorite models to bring in, Silent One. Haku, talk to us about Silent One.
When you don't want to hire a guard, you hire a silent one and slap Arcane Reservoir onto it.
Okay, but how is the model different or better than that model?
So the difference is you have to pay attacks. So the main thing you get when you get the silent one is you get more ice pillars and the ranged healing. Obviously, both of those are really good. It's a standard classic, and you know almost all Arc's true ever since Reservoir got changed to living only. And so you're going to see a lot of these guys to pretty much try to cut off lanes to strat markers is a lot of what they used to be used for, and they're still being used for that today. It's not as big of a deal, which is kind of why you saw them fall out of favor, because you no longer have like symbols, the worst strategy ever made, where you can just have them in your deployment zone and just create a whole entire army of pillars around them, and then just be like, you can't get to them. Now things are in the middle. They generally have no line of sight requirements, just be within 1 or be within 2 or whatever the current strategy says they are. And so they're mainly now used for just being annoying by potentially blocking the lane with the ice pillar and then just healing models. That's it. Really good.
Pete, what do you got for us on the Silent Ones?
Yeah, for Sandeep 1 and 2, it's a sometimes higher. I think if you like flexing into the Ice Golem, I think a Silent One's a good consideration. You can put Arcane Reservoir on it with Magical Training. But the big thing is you're getting more Ice Pillars. So if you bring the Ice Golem, that's helping, heal itself. It's helping get the built-in trigger. And it's just a good healing model. It's just a range 8. You can get these cool arcs that you can get through the ice pillars to get some really long range heals. So yeah, I mean, I've played it with Sandeep too, and it's good when you want to bring the ice golem. Even if you don't, it's just a solid healer. If you really want to just leave it kind of in your deployment zone and just arc heal things.
Yeah. I agree. Mr. Joel, silent one.
Never tried it myself, but I definitely see the utility there. I think both Pete and Haku have gone over them adequately.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, on to the next one. We got Joss. Haku, talk to us about Joss.
You want to hit things and do irreducible damage. That's it. You want to hit things and do irreducible damage.
That's the tweet.
Oh, right. Also, ignore terrifying. That sometimes comes up as well. Terrifying, manipulative, hit thing, irreducible damage.
Yeah, he's got a really good irreducible attack. Yeah, fair
you have command construct, so that's really nice synergy with a lot of your golems. Basically, the metal golem, actually.
One you hate.
That model that's never playable.
Look, I hired this in Mayfang, okay? It's the only one I know that actually has construct on it.
That's hilarious.
No, yeah, if you're hiring a little synergy with Metal Golem, other than that, Electric Discharge is good to have. Blasting, ignore armor. I'm not talking. 2, 4, 5, ignore armor, irreducible.
Yeah, it's a good
Bruceless.
irreducible attack.
There you go. That's it.
Pete, tell us why we're wrong or why we're right.
No, I mean, I definitely think it's kind of like an Arcanist sometimes higher for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know I'm going to need to chunk something down. Okay, I don't want it to use soul stones, or I don't want it to use its armor, bring Joss. But the reason why I like it sometimes with Sandeep 2 specifically is because of the mobility. Because if you notice stuff like the Wind Golem and its demise ability, or the toss with Banasuva, it's not keyword locked for those mobile actions. So you can place Joss 4 inches, you can toss him 10 inches, you can get him in the spot where you need him to be. Whereas I feel like with some other crews, sometimes it's harder to get him where you want him to be. Whereas Sandeep can just put him there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Joel, talk to us about our irreducible boy here. Anything to add?
I mean, I think you hit on the high points. The only question I'd say is, like, what do you take out? Because he's 11 soulstone, so you're probably giving up one of the golems for him.
Usually if I bring him, it's a 6 model tight crew. Like there's 6 models and it's going to be really tight, and you just got to keep your bubble together and try to grind out the win.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a small crew if you're including
It's
him.
not I don't think he's going to be as good out of keyword in GG4, but in GG3 where you wanted to sit and fight a lot of times, it was pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Let's keep this stone rolling with the best transition joke of all time. Haku, Lohith.
What?
He's a golem made of stone, so we keep the stone rolling.
Oh,
What?
Lohith. Okay,
signature
I didn't
ability is
hear
what?
you. Like you crackled like right when you said it, and I was like,
Right
wait,
when he was
You
delivering
killed my joke! Ah!
the crackle killed the joke.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. All right, Lohith.
You don't want demise.
Yep.
Thanks, Haku. Demise bad. Bring golem.
Demise
It stopped.
bad. Bring Lohith. No demise. Done.
Haku is reverting to his caveman mode now. I think that's what's happening. Yeah, obviously that is kind of what he's good at. Pete, why don't you give us a little bit more of an articulate rundown than Haku did as to why this model is good?
Yeah, I mean, it is demise bad. I mean, that's
He's like, no, Haku right, demise bad.
But the thing is, once again, it's a 50 mil base, and as an Arcanist player, you're looking at him to get rid of demise anyways. But once again, it's Sandeep 2 specifically, because that's where I'm coming from with a lot of these out of keyword picks. He puts him where he needs to be, and you can do that out of activation. So if I have a kill on the board and I don't want that demise to save the model, I can go, I'm going to have the Wind Golem concentrate. Lohith is going to go ahead and place 4. Lantern of Souls is now active. I'm going to go ahead and kill that model now. So it really cuts down the reaction time of your opponent, whereas a lot of other times you move Lohith into position and then they have an activation to try and, get that out of there. So it's definitely good for Sandeep too, because he has so many ways to move things during an activation and then benefit and profit off of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Joel, any parting words for Demise Bad Boy?
I think by the lore, this guy should have the academic keyword. That
I
would probably
know.
Yeah,
break the
that makes
game
sense.
and the internet all at once. So it's probably best that Weird decided to not choose violence. I'll say that.
However, Weird does have a precedence now to add a keyword to a model. So fingers
Barbaros.
crossed down the road.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're
I'm
saying,
saying
there's a chance. Let's go. Giggity giggity. All right. So all right, next one up. Let's talk about Bellaventine. Let's keep it in crew here. Haku, what's the deal?
Let's deadly pursuit. Good. There we go. Realistically, it's deadly pursuit. Good. Stun. Good.
I've got your back. Good. I guess.
Yeah, the I've got your back is a little more secondary in a crew that has already a bunch of obscene, movement effects.
Yeah.
I think the main reason you're hiring this guy is because you just really love this model, and the model is already inherently pretty good, and stunning people has in the current GG, and by the GG I just mean the meta we're in, is absolutely bonkers good. So you can justify taking someone who has a good stun attack in most crews.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
Deadly Pursuit is also pretty strong in this GG.
Yeah, that's fair. Pete, what do you got?
Yeah, there's another model that I'll talk about when we get to it as well. But the big reason that Bellaventine actually got put in some of my list was because of the stun, specifically in matchups like Levy. Like Levy just destroys Sandeep. It's so bad. Like if you haven't played that matchup as a Sandeep player, it is so bad. He ignores everything, and it just makes your models just melt. So stun's one of those things that I've done for some of those difficult models and masters where it's like, okay, I want a range stun. They have a high willpower, and yeah, that's kind of why I bring her. So it's not because of a lot of the other stuff. It's mostly for the stun on the range 12 gun.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Joel, anything else about this stunning clown lady? Keeping it PG, please. Not
Sandeep
PG,
1 has
MA17.
stunned. His Arcane Storm has a stun trigger, and you don't have a lot of uses for high crows with academics, so we've got stunned at home.
Well,
You just
Joel,
have to you just
I
have
don't
to
have
be
reps.
Deep one.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, Bella's obviously a fantastic model. Like, pretty much every word on her card is good. I just think in general you're gonna find better options in keyword. I mean,
Yeah.
Kandara does a lot of the same things she does, and she's going to be 2 stones cheaper, and you can arc her attacks. So
She's got a really good kit. I mean, I don't think anybody looks at this card and says this model doesn't have a good kit.
Yeah.
So I think
a
we
lot
kind
of her
all
stuff
agree.
is keyword locked, though.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get a lot of utility out. You're going to get less utility out of it with
No,
the academics.
I think you
No,
guys
this
hit
is
it on the
highly
nose.
targeted stunned. Like you know for a fact the crew you're going up against, you need to hire a model that stuns somebody, and overall she mostly pays for her soulstone costs elsewhere. So it's generally fine.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Neil Henry, Mr. Haku. What do we got?
What am I going to say for this guy?
I mean, he had a pretty decent glow up. with his rules update.
Yeah. I think the main thing bulldoze good. There you go.
There we go. We did it. All
I was
right.
gonna say that. You need someone who picks up markers because you drop too many of them, and now you're helping your opponent. So bulldoze good.
Fair enough. Pete, do you have a little bit of a more perhaps explained scenario than that?
Yeah, so this is Sandeep 2 tech. Sandeep 1, probably you're not seeing him, but I played mostly Sandeep 2. So the big thing is, one, he synergizes because when I bring him, I'm going to bring the Metal Golem as well because they just help each other out, getting scraps out and all that.
Mhm.
But once again, I brought him when I needed stun. So I only brought Bellaventine when they basically blocked Foundry if they banned it. So usually I wouldn't bring Bellaventine unless Neil Henry was banned. So So that is something to kind of consider. But Bulldoze also, I played a lot of games against Neverborn, where you just have all these just crappy markers all over the place. You need them out of the way, so you bulldoze over them. They turn into scrap markers, and yeah, just putting out stun, flurry, ignoring armor, a lot of cool things that you want to do in Sandeep, anyways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As I was listening to you talk, I was like, oh, that's pretty clever, actually. I hadn't really thought of him in this list before today. So, Joel, anything on the Steel Driving Man before we move on to?
I'm a bad Arcanist, and I've never played him.
Wild.
Well, you were justified until the errata. He was absolutely trash.
Yeah.
He's definitely playable for now. I mean, you're potentially sat 7, you're min 3 potentially. And it's very situationally on that one, so I just ignore it. But
yeah, Arcanists in general, we don't have a lot of great marker removal, so I can definitely see him being teched in for that. I tend to hire dabblers a lot, so I usually go with them for marker removal. But it's
dabble.
I dabble in dabblers. But that's not going to be nearly as reliable as a bulldoze. So if you absolutely need to get rid of some markers, I think Neil's your guy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, we're almost at the end. We just got a couple of versatile models left, 4 to be specific. So let's start out with Mecharachnid. Haku, how do you feel about this big metal spider?
I hate it. People love trying to jam this model into every goddamn Arcanist list, and I don't get it. It's the quintessential ignore everything. It counters everything because Precise is legitimately a really stupid ability. The downside is it's on stat 5 on a model that generally just dies because, let's be honest, ignoring armor is not uncommon, and so you can just have this thing be killed really simply. But when you do get to go in and attack people, particularly the hard to kill models is generally what you're trying to work around when you're doing this. That being said, as was already pointed out, 4 Wind Golems now kind of just has that job. I don't really see Mecharachnid bringing anything substantial, except for you're like, I have 6 Soulstones left over.
Yeah, that's fair. Anything about our precise metal friend here, Pete, that tickles your fancy?
Yeah, I mean, once again, it builds in with a lot of the scraps that Metal Golem is going to put out. So a lot of these models where it's like, oh, this one likes scrap markers, it pairs up with the Metal Golem. So that'll turn on its bonus. That ignores stuff. Sandeep, it's a little easier to deliver. Sandeep also does a better job of keeping it up because he can put out shielded, he can heal it, he can place it into less scary positions. So it is one of those things where you can't just run it up into something, but it is going to, when delivered, do what you want it to do.
Yeah,
except for stat 5, so a good chunk of the time it just doesn't hit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a it's a 6 stone model, so yeah, definitely.
Mr. Joel, bring us home on the metal spider boy.
I've never had much success with these for the reasons that Haku has mentioned. They're low stat, they're not a lot of health, they just kind of die.
Yeah, I think there's more ignore armor, which makes them pretty scary to put them on the table a lot of times.
Yeah, and you don't have ways to kind of dish AP out to them like you would with a Hoffman crew in Sandeep. I think they might be a little bit better with Hoffman, where the Metallurgist can kind of nudge them along. But I think in Sandeep, you just don't have enough support to make them work.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, we are going to go from one big metal spider to a large group of small metal spiders. Steam Arachnid swarms. You still love these as much as you used to a couple years ago, Haku?
No, because if you notice the errata date, that's when I stopped loving them. I know people still like this model because you slap the charge upgrade on them, you can do some pretty devastating attacks with them, but realistically, I think we're just power corrupt them as well as the errata to the point where it's just not that relevant. They are going to die going in. are you really going to pass up hiring one of like the different golems just because you want to save a couple soulstones? Maybe, but then you lose a lot of your synergies and stuff like that, and I don't think you're getting too much from the latch on. But hey, when you can move them around a bit more easier out of keyword in Sandeep, maybe that's the benefit, is you move them with latch on and then they have a -1 defense. But realistically, no. I'm still just they're fine, but they're not good. So I sleep on them almost always.
All right, fair enough. Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, when I bring these, because I do bring them with Sandeep. I haven't brought them with any other keyword, but I tell you what, when they're in the right pool or the right matchup, it's pretty good. So where I like playing them is when I think there's going to be some squishier models, because honestly, with Banasuva, I just tossed this thing 10 inches at the... Actually, I think I did this in our game, Doug. I think I
sure
brought
did.
it, and I killed your little girl totem with it. So
Yeah, you sure did. You fucking threw it into Chio and chomped
But
Chio
the pool that I used to like it in is I would toss the crap out of it. I'd put diesel engine on it so it has on the move or whatever. But I basically turn 1 and into turn 2 scored breakthrough and sabotage by itself, because I mean, models are just so concerned with the rest of the crew that it's kind of scoring you points. You don't throw it into models unless it can kill it. So it's like, there's a squishy scheme runner, I'll go kill it. So yeah, I mean, it has its place and it has a lot of fun playability. It's not always the best thing to, but in the right pool, it can score you points and win you games.
Yeah, I think.
And Sandeep once again just delivers it where it needs to be. So you need to recognize, what does it need to do this game? Because you're investing 10 soul stones, so it needs to be brought when it can score points on its own, and the rest of your crew is just causing chaos with Sandeep.
Yeah, that's fair. Joel, what do you got?
And you can't invest the 12 soul stones to just beat Duet.
Joel, what do you got on this guy? Any other insights?
Every Arcanist player should have this model in their bag, because there will come a time when you go to a tournament and it's corner deployment and one corner of the board is a big forest, and so you're going to be a defender and some jabroni is going to be like, you have to deploy in that forest.
In
which case you need this unimpeded and nimble on this guy so that you can actually play Malifaux.
In which case, let me show you. And Joel opens his trench coat, and there's 20 Steam Arachnid models, and he's like, "You want this guy?"
I think I have like 9.
So
yeah, I mean, staple.
And the answer
Soulstone,
wasn't just play Mei Fang. Interesting.
like staple Soulstone cache to this guy and call me in the morning.
I will say the one piece of thing that I can add here is that my dog has eaten this model not just once, but twice. So I left a fully built Steam Arachnid like box, so it had like the swarms and also the big ones. And she got mad one day that I like wasn't paying her enough attention or like wasn't home on time or something, and she ate them. And then I bought the box again like a month later, and she ate them on the sprue. So she's eaten this model built and on sprue. Haven't you, little buddy?
That's glorious.
Yeah, she gives no fucks about them.
I will say, the point brought up though is great. They are much more scheme runners nowadays, and they are actually go in and attack things.
Yeah, that's how Pete
3
used
AP
it against
scheme
me.
runners.
He used it to eat my totem and then just was going to score a bunch of points with it, and there wasn't anything.
Yeah, it's kind
I
of
could
like
really
what people
attack
are
with
using
it.
like Cavern Fs for at the moment. Big model that can 1v1 those smaller scheme runners, and then also just do the scheme running themselves.
They're also fun models to bring against Nephilim, because they're immune to Black Blood, and once they latch on, the Nephilim are even more hilarious defense, and you can just onslaught them. It's just fun. It's fun to watch the Nekama players just die inside when they see that model.
That's really funny. All right, Gearlings? Haku? Gearlings?
When you don't want to pay for Steam Arachnids and you want to just get your different great, amazing 3 AP scheme runners, I honestly think this is actually why you probably actually never hire Steam Arachnids anymore. Watch Chain is still just kind of cracked. You're basically unimpeded, because you're better unimpeded. Yeah, you have an escape mechanic where if they attack you, you get to jump aside. Admittedly, you have to win the duel, but it's not
You know.
that hard to win in Stab 5. It's a little hard. Anyways, you don't get pass tokens anymore, so super depression there, but you want a 3 AP 5 Soulstone model, this is your boy.
Yeah, I think Gearlings are pretty decent. Pete, what do you got on these guys?
Yeah, you could. Gearlings are so good with Sandeep. Like, Gamin are really good, but man, Sandeep is putting out so many conditions that it's just fueling these things. Like, you have fire going out, you're putting out shielded, they're moving out of activation, so they get a shielded there. They get all this focus because you're putting out all this focus from your models, and then they just use that to get free actions to either scheme or walk or whatever you need them to do. And then watch chain when you have the mask is just insane because you can just scoot 20 inches across the board with these dudes. So yeah, they're pretty insane with saying they're good anyways. Like, I would play them with most Arcanist stuff when I need to scheme, but in Sandeep they can get pretty nutty.
Yeah, 20 inches and you can interact at the end of that 20 inches.
That's right. That is correct.
Yeah, very good. Joel, anything to add, good sir?
Yeah, I can see it. I think I'd rather have a win Gamin for the demise, but these guys are pretty baller.
Yeah, I like Gearlings a lot. I think they're pretty good. All right, we have leased the last model, and then we'll just do a quick jam session on how to play and how to play against. But here it is, Harris J5, Mr. Haku.
Yeah, with for much the same reason the Gearlings are good, J5 is good because he'll absorb all of the conditions, and then you just have a shielded 20 guy with 2 focus that can just go in there and just be super obnoxious with Pendulum Swing. Pendulum Swing is one of the silliest attack actions with the Meteor Hammer trigger built in that you'll see anywhere, because you can attack low HP guy or low defense guys and then just splash on a guy 6 inches away with Meteor Hammer. So yeah, I can definitely see taking this guy a good chunk of the time when you're against either a high model account or ones that don't immediately just one-shot him potentially.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mr. Pete, what do you got on our other bigger robot friend that comes in the box with the smaller robot friend?
Yeah, it's basically for, once again, you're getting conditions so you can just do an extra action. The overwhelming intricacy helps with the unpack even more. But the big thing I usually bring him for is exactly what Longton said, where you want that Meteor Hammer to kill something in the back. So you just hit something that's like defense 4 or defense 5, and then just splash onto something hanging out in the back.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. That feels like it would be really, if you're not expecting that could be a spicy way to pick something off pretty
even
well.
When you are expecting it, it's disgusting.
I guess even when you are expecting it. Joel, anything else on this guy?
Another model you should always have in your bag. Just works with a lot of crews, has a lot of good stuff printed on his card. Give him Diesel Engine, that's pretty hilarious. And he'll just wreck a lot of face for a henchman. Or not even a henchman, an enforcer.
Yeah, and I think somebody else also picked the Soulstone Miner as a versatile because you're playing Arcanist, so why not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do you guys want to chat about the Soulstone Miner really quickly?
Soulstone's good.
Well,
yeah,
now that
always decent. Never, it's just not a great option at the moment, and I'll stick by that actually. I've definitely fallen out of favor with these guys ever since their nerf. They still do things. Now that the corners is coming back as a scheme, though, you're going to see these guys come back because anytime you need to be on a whole different corner in the map, obviously it's a little OP. You just have to wait a turn in order to start scoring.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about Cassandra Felton? I feel like we should talk about her.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about her.
Yeah, I really like Cassandra Felton. Actually, Joel was the first person to ever turn me on to yo, you should always be looking at Felton. And ever since I had that conversation with Joel, Brandon and I are basically always kind of looking to put him into lists. So, I mean, I guess Joel, this is you're the one that taught me about it initially. So do you want to just talk a little bit about why you love this model so much? Really quickly.
Cassandra's big thing is upstage, which lets you copy a tactical action off another model. And the kind of the funny thing about this is that it's not keyword locked,
No.
and it's also
Or
not
bonus
locked
locked.
Nope.
to non-bonus actions,
Sure
which
isn't.
it seems like it should be.
Yeah.
But that's what's printed on the card, so you can just use her to copy a lot of tactical actions that you probably shouldn't. I typically, we'll talk about this in another episode, I typically take her with Witness so I can rework my config an extra time.
Oh,
in a
that's
turn.
spicy.
Yeah.
Yeah, she gets brought a lot with Sandeep too as well.
I just
Yeah,
feel like
I can
she's
see
great,
why.
right? Like she's got to be one of the best. Like I'm just gonna take this and put it in my list. Oh, okay, picks. At least to me, model just seems nuts.
The other thing that's fun about Cassandra is I think it's her ability's celebrity. It's basically when she interacts, she gets to hand out distracted, and she has Don't Mind Me, and she's pretty mobile with nimble, so you can actually interact with a henchman and have a pretty significant effect on your opponent just by doling out some distracted.
Yeah, Seamus has that on. Seamus 2 gives that celebrity status out with his upgrades as well, and I've had it be pretty effective. I think this is a great roundup, guys. Thank you so much for helping me navigate this rather large and complex keyword. I think the last thing that I want to do is, Pete, I want to ask you a little bit about if you're a player and you're, coming up against Sandeep 2 for the first time, how would you approach playing against Sandeep 2? What are some things that you can do to mitigate the massive amount of pyre markers that are going to be thrown at you? How do you set up? Like, what would you do if, you were versus? And then, Joel, I kind of have the same question to you, but kind of more focused on Sandeep 1. So I guess, Pete, let's start with you. What do you got for me about knowledge about fighting or coming up against Sandeep 2? How do you fight
So deployment is very important when you play against the Font of Magic, because if you play in wedge, flank, or standard, so pretty much anything but corner, Sandeep can activate turn 1, toss himself 10 inches, and Aetheric Control is 10 inches, and then the Pyre Marker is about 2, and then it's 2 inches off of that. So there's a huge threat with getting those hazardous Pyre Markers going. And then you're like, oh, well, he'll be really extended then. Well, it's like, no, because he can just do his bonus and move 4 inches back, so he's a little less exposed. But what you need to do is, one, don't deploy clumped up. Even if you think like, oh, I'll have a couple activations to get myself, declumped. It's like, well, no, if it's available and the Sandeep player wants to be aggressive, they can go ahead and get you first activation if they really want to in a lot of deployments and situations. So blocking line of sight, because remember, you have to have line of sight to put pyre markers or shockwave markers down. If he can't see the spot, he can't put it down there. So hiding behind trees, blocking terrain, that definitely helps. Spreading out, that will help mitigate it. It's not going to stop it. But also recognizing kind of these kill zones where pyre markers are going to go down. So I feel like mobile crews fare better against Sandeep. Crews that, like, I'm playing Molly right now. Molly is really good at kind of just spreading out, going to points, doing what they want in these specific spots, and not clumping up. Those crews, I think, will fare better against Sandeep. If you're incorporeal, or if you ignore hazardous terrain, if you ignore shockwaves, those are all good tech picks to bring. I wouldn't say go out of your way to do it, because chances are you'll still catch on fire in some fashion. But anytime you can ignore those three things, it's going to help a little bit. A little condition removal will help too, because you'll find a lot of your stuff on fire. And honestly, the best way to do it is just kill Sandeep. If your opponent gets aggressive, Sandeep's not super hard to kill. He just has shield 2 and stones. He's only defense 5, so defense is the best way to attack him. So yeah, I think killing him, killing Banasuva are the best things, because once those two models are gone, it's still a little difficult to deal with the crew, because it's just good models, but you have less of the shenanigans going on.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. That's like really, really good info.
Also, one last thing, staggered also sucks for Sandeep's crew, because there's so much pushes and out of activation, tosses and all this stuff. So if you can stagger his crew, that cuts a lot of that off.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I remember when we were debriefing after my thorough butt kicking, you actually said that exact same thing as well. So it's something like a divine strike shot from Manos early in like round 1 before the unpack could be good.
Yep.
That's like what you're referencing, something like that, right?
Yep, exactly.
Cool. All right. Joel, what do you got for opponent rolls up? They're playing against Sandeep 1. Summoners are back in vogue. It's GG4. It's a wild world. What are we doing?
Well, any anti-summon tech is obviously going to be helpful. So if you have Exorcism, if you have Charm Warders, throw them in there to put a massive wrench into Sandeep's plans. Other than that, I think it's very similar to Sandeep 2, that if you can get into Sandeep's face, he's not very survivable. He's definitely going to lead from the back, so it might be difficult, but he also wants to inch up a little bit. Sandeep 1 is also a pretty tight bubble. You want things within those 6 inches for your mantras to kind of work off one another. So if you can pull that bubble apart either with lures or just with positioning such that you're surrounding them and they have to commit to a particular flank to score points, that's another thing you can do. Sandeep also appears particularly vulnerable to stunned. His bonus actions drive a lot of the crew's value, and their triggers do as well. I mean, like, Kandara is kind of an obvious example of this, right? If she's stunned, she can't Divine Strike you. So anything that can dole out a lot of stunned, and Arcanists in general don't have a lot of great condition removal. So if you manage to get stunned on Sandeep, he's probably stunned for the turn.
Yeah, that's a good call out. All right. I mean, just to close out here, I'll kind of leave this open floor. As Sandeep players or as Arcanist players, do you guys have any last thoughts that you want to make sure that the internet is aware of before we sign off for the day here? Kind of just to the crew. Joel, Pete, Haku, anything you guys want to say as a last piece that we might not have gotten to yet today or anything like that?
I'll chime in that pulse healing also goes like a long way against a crew like this. You have to remember that you can just undo a lot of their reactions by just, healing your own, and they're getting hyper card intensive with all the TNs they're flipping. All the cards they're discarding to take actions, that their hand resources go away really quickly. So a lot of the game against Sandeep is just being very conscious of your hand resources to them, how to try to make your counter actions be the most hyper intensive if you don't have those ignore options. Because they're all about I need to cheat my 5 in order to have my Shockwave to go off, and then you have a bunch of cards to go off, and then it's just how many of those are you going to have to cheat? If you play clumped, obviously great value for them. You're more spread out, or even if you are clumped, if they hit every one of your models, then you go, oh cool, on the duet I just pulse out heal 2, woo. You have a lot of options like that to potentially just be the counter, to just change the math numbers on the hand resources for what you're doing versus what they're getting for each card.
That's a good point. Mr. Pete, Mr. Joel.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll say is, there is a lot of interactions with Sandeep. That's one of the things that really drew me to him, specifically the Font of Magic, and probably sometime into GG4, I'll probably try one a little bit more to see how that plays in the new season. But I will say, if you want more of a deep dive on Sandeep Font of Magic, we probably about a couple months ago we did a full episode on him. So if you want to go to Rage Quit Wire podcast, you can definitely check out that episode.
We'll link
that
that.
for a couple hours.
I'm going to link that in the body as well, Pete. So when we're done here, if you just want to send that to me, and guys, that'll be hyperlinked, so you can just click through on this video. It'll be in the body description of this video.
Yep, that's all I had. You can get more hot Sandeep tech.
Some hot, spicy Sandeep tech. All right, cool. Joel, you got any last party words?
Don't forget Sandeep's mantras. Both his title version and his original have some pretty solid mantras. Sandeep 1 just doles out damage, and Sandeep 2 lets you move a marker for the low cost of a concentrate. So
yeah, and Sandeep's demise also, I forgot to mention, just puts out staggered on Sandeep 2, so you can just concentrate, put staggered on a model, and then go to town.
Yeah.
Although the downside being is you're close enough for them to start hitting Sandeep too.
That's like the danger zone, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is always remember to concentrate and always remember your triggers when you're studying elemental magic.
Concentrating is never bad in a Sandeep crew. If you don't know what to do, just concentrate.
Yeah. and then remember all of your triggers, dude.
Yes.
I remember when I was playing you because we were also on clock and we were both playing pretty quick. You were playing really quick though. You were like, do this thing, trigger, and I was like, damn, I've never seen a person move that quickly with that many triggers before.
Yeah, because you do one action and it triggers like 5 things.
Yeah, and you were doing it at speed on a clock, and we didn't have it was a brisk pace for the game. It was designed to be that way, and you were like accurately moving 90 triggers in like a single turn. It was crazy.
So just to give people an idea, because I think this is important for people playing complex crews, including summoners, just get your reps in, because we played on clocks in Houston, and in most of my games, I had 15, 20 minutes left on the clock. So just get your reps in.
Yeah, and I think that's a great like just takeaway in general for complex crews in Malifaux. I think that's a really, 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 really strong like, hey, the best way to like take a little mental load off of yourself when you need to remember 50 to 60 triggers and do it at pace is to have practice games with the crew so that you're not always having to remember. You want it to be like second nature to you so that the actual game and the board state and the opponent and the scheme pool is what you're spending the majority of your mental load on. I feel like that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and Sandeep also, there's a lot of triggers that you don't need to do. Like, it's like, oh, you can move this marker, but you don't need to, so just skip it.
Yeah, and knowing when those are triggers that you can skip versus knowing when they're critically important, that is also pretty important in a crew like this, I think. So, cool. All right, guys. Well, we did it. You guys will see more of Joel. You'll see more of Pete if he agrees to ever come back on after this horrible experience that I'm sure he just went through. And
it was okay.
Unfortunately, we're stuck with Haku forever. So that's who we got. All right, guys. I guess the last thing to
shout
do.
out.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I'm going to shout out to all the Malifaux World Series games that are going on right now. I think this will come out in, I don't know, probably within 2 months. The finals will be coming up sometime in January. We're trying to record all the games. I know I'm going to be recording my games, and as a fellow treat to other people, I will be recording Pope Darpa's games as well. So I know we'll at least get those recorded, and they will be on, so you can watch our group stages. Hopefully I get out of group stages with my Immaculate switch to Neverborn. That's going to save me. I promise, guys. I did not practice GG4 at all. All right.
Great. Immaculate pitch, Haku. Amazing.
It's gonna be fun. Good games. You're gonna be able to see a lot of top people playing GG4 for the first time. Honestly, I know a lot of us haven't been able to practice as much as we want to for it, but we're at least excited to be playing GG4, and you're gonna see a lot of the top competitors recorded and streamed.
Yeah, and also if you guys haven't checked out Rage Quit Wire yet, Pete and Dixon are awesome. As long as they want to, they're obviously going to be invited to come back here. So we're going to link Rage Quit Wire's primary channel. We'll link their Discord, and we'll also link that specific episode that Pete talked about for Sandeep. Pete, you got anything else going on in the wild world of the internet that you want to let the folks know about?
I mean, we're doing more YouTube stuff, so that'll keep kind of getting rolled out. We're trying to do at least 2 to 3 videos a month. So obviously the podcast comes first, but we're trying to do more YouTube stuff.
All right, yeah, keep it cool for that. We'll have all that stuff linked in the body. Joel, any parting words for the internet? Any strong fuck yous? Any I love yous? Whatever you got. What do you want to put out there into the world?
Just flip some cards, have fun.
All right, boys. Say goodbye to the internet. We did it.
See y'all.
Peace. Adios.
Perfect.